Sarah, welcome to the Astroben podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to chat to you, and thank you so much for fitting me in. Am I right in assuming this is quite a busy time for you?
Yep, we are certainly full in the midst of a lot of training and development. So yeah, a little bit going on right now.
What have you been up to over the last few months? Because I had Jared on the podcast towards the end of 2022, and it sounded pretty full on. But I imagine that's just kept going over the last few months. So, what have you been up to this year?
Gosh, we've had all sorts of training activities over the last couple months. We most recently have really started getting into some of the mission specific training. So we've been in Hawthorne, California at SpaceX's headquarters for a number of weeks of training, looking at some of the bigger topics and more challenging to train for a mission, such as the EVA. But yeah, no, we've been doing a lot of training, and we frankly have a good amount still to go before launch.
So you've already touched on the EVA, which is something I'm very excited about, and I'm sure a lot of people listening will be excited about. So what does that mean? Does it mean you're actually leaving the Crew Dragon, or is it depressurizing the entire capsule? So technically you're outside, but you're inside. Tell me about what, as much as you can tell me, what actually is involved.
So it's kind of exactly what you said. So the Dragon spacecraft obviously doesn't have an airlock. So in order to accomplish a spacewalk, the entire interior of the capsule has to be vented to vacuum. And so this is a brand new operation for the SpaceX team. They've been doing an amazing job building brand new suits to support this. But yes, so effectively we'll go through kind of a pre-breathe time period, extended dwell, where we're slowly adjusting oxygen concentration and cabin pressure in order to help mitigate the risk of decompression sickness. Then we'll all get suited up. We'll vent the entire capsule to vacuum. We'll have two people go outside of the capsule, come back in, and then repressurize the capsule. So a pretty major operation. It's a huge development effort and an amazing learning opportunity for the entire SpaceX team and all the work that's gone into it.
Yeah, so I guess you can train for some parts of that. So you can train in a vacuum back here on Earth, but you can't train for that feeling of leaving the safety and confines of the capsule. How have you been sort of mentally preparing for that? Have you been kind of like imagining it over and over again when you're lying in your bed at night? And are you excited or nervous or a mixture of the both?
So there's certainly a lot of different types of analogs that you can try and train different portions of the EVA, I would say. So we've been doing NASA traditionally trains spacewalks in the neutral buoyancy lab, so that's going to be a great analog for simulating relatively neutral buoyancy and weightlessness. You still have physical limitations of drag in the water, so it's not a perfect analog. We are doing some of the physical sensation training using a very specific hoist offload system. So it's programmed in a way that you can basically, you know, touch with a finger and you move your entire body as if you are weightless. So you can really get into the mechanics of what you need to do. Um, we can integrate our fully pressurized suit in that environment. So it actually gives you a great capacity to train the physical movements that you need to go through. I think there's a kind of another big piece of this, which is though, how do you prepare mentally, obviously? And we're doing what we can to supplement that in different ways. So, for instance, we've been taking on different operational trainings that require, you know, very strong decision making skills in a high stakes environment. So, recently we did parachute jump course at the Air Force Academy where they train you to go and jump on your own for all five of the jumps. So from your first jump, you're jumping solo. And so it's an amazing analog for having to make decisions under really life impacting scenarios. So we're trying to build out the curriculum and make sure we're covered for everything that we might need to for this spacewalk.
Mm. And I guess a parachute jump is a really good example because it's like you're like trusting in yourself. And I don't know if you pack your own parachute, but I don't think I'd want to do that on my first jump. That sounds I don't know if I believe in myself that much. Um, but I guess it's all part of the sort of self-confidence in, being able to make those right decisions and trust in your crew. And I guess it must be like what's it like having Jared as sort of commander of the mission and obviously experienced in space? Does that do you all sort of draw strength from that, given that it's almost becoming a normal job for him at this point?
It is absolutely amazing to get to work with Jared. And frankly, every single member of this crew is bringing something very unique and an incredible skill set with them to the table. So, Jared is an incredible leader, and he's really good at helping us build an incredible team. Um, but, we have Kid, who's bringing all of his 16, 20 years in the Air Force fighter pilot experience. And you have Anna, who's a mission director at SpaceX on the ground, working with these spacecraft while they're in orbit. So it's frankly been an incredible experience working on such a really effective team. It's been really, really cool to get to learn from them and figure out how to work as a team and how we integrate all of these very different and very knowledgeable skill sets to be kind of the most effective team that we can be.
It's so exciting. So tell me about your role because you're a mission specialist. Um, what specifically does that mean? Does that mean doing science experiments? Is there sort of day-to-day roles that you'll have as well? Um, yeah, tell me as much as you can about your role. What's your role? What are you responsible for on Polaris Dawn?
So primarily as mission specialist, yes, you're correct. I'm going to be focused on the science and research throughout the mission. We have, I think we're partnered with about 23 different institutions and have close to 40 experiments. So from a time and research perspective, we're trying to maximize in every opportunity we can. So there are within that research, there's a ton of stuff aimed at what are the questions we can answer for future long duration spaceflight, and what can we contribute towards solving some of the problems that we'll encounter on that journey. So I, throughout the mission, definitely will be focused on supporting execution of that. But then beyond that, I mean, we're all involved in the EVA operations, so there's a huge kind of operational component partway through the mission. We'll all be doing suit checkouts, we'll be doing equipment checkouts, stuff like that. Um, and then just kind of whatever I can help with on the mission. So there's obviously a lot of cargo management, there's a lot of inventory tracking, stuff like that that we'll need to make sure is set for flight, make sure we have a safe center of gravity for reentry to Earth's atmosphere, stuff like that.
Mm. So tell me how you found out that you were going to be on Polaris Dawn. And apologies if you've said this in interviews before, but I genuinely don't know the story, so I'm fascinated. You're obviously working at SpaceX before, as an engineer. So what's it like working for SpaceX? Is it the sort of thing that, once you saw inspiration for, was there talk amongst people that work there that they're going to be recruiting from internally? Was that a thing? Did you ever in your wildest dreams think that you would get selected? So I'd love to hear your story, how you found out, how did that come about?
Gosh, I could not have imagined in my wildest dreams that this was coming. I I grew up in Colorado, and I was really not involved in science and technology. I was really raised in the arts, and my mom raised me to be a classical violinist. And so I didn't actually find engineering or interest in science necessarily until I met an astronaut in high school, um, former astronaut Joe Tanner. I actually ended up meeting him and putting together a project working for him. And he really encouraged me to study engineering, which isn't something I considered. So I did end up studying engineering. And I think what had always interested me within that field was human exploration. And so straight out of college, I found the programs that were doing human spaceflight, and I ended up coming to work at SpaceX on human factors interior design of the capsule. So how do you evaluate the controls at the cockpit to make sure you can do all of the manual piloting tasks that you need to? How do you don suits? How do you live and work in the spacecraft, and how do you design it in a way that supports humans? And so then from there, it was kind of a natural progression when it was time to actually start training our first astronauts for Bob and Doug for the Demo 2 mission of, hey, you know how these interfaces work. How about you go put together some training on them? So it's been a fascinating progression over time. It's an amazing place to work with some of just the most incredibly brilliant people I think I will ever meet. But I certainly had no expectations that this would ever result, or that it could ever result in actually going to space. So I worked with Jared on the Inspiration 4 mission and got to know him through that. I have a huge respect for him and what the Inspiration 4 crew were able to do. But I found out basically I had a meeting put in my calendar under false pretense that there was a documentary that Jared was flying again, and they were doing continuity interviews for the next documentary. So I went in, and they said, they'll be here in just a minute. And I was like, who's they? And then Jared walked in, and my director walked in, and they started telling me about the Polaris program. Jared was flying again and what the goals and objectives were of this program. He asked if I would be a mission specialist on it. So it was entirely out of left field. It's pretty shocking to think back on. My favorite part is that I knew about 4 hours before Anna knew. And so I had found out that she was also going to be on the crew, but I couldn't tell her. And so we sit right across from each other at our desks. So I would just like look over and know that her entire world was about to change, and she had no idea.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, I'm chatting to her on an episode in a couple of weeks, so yeah, I'll definitely have to talk to her about that. How she felt the other way, knowing that you knew.
Absolutely.
That's such an amazing story. Are you going to take I don't know if there's room in the cargo, but are you going to take a violin to space? Like, I'd love the idea of seeing a classically trained violinist playing in space. Or can you say that at this point?
It's definitely a possibility. The thing about taking a spacecraft to vacuum is it wasn't originally designed to be exposed to vacuum. So they are going through a qualification process to understand exactly how all of the materials are going to behave in vacuum. And with that, you might have to change materials. You might have to modify the interior. You might have to control certain materials and make sure they aren't going to release toxins or repressurize the capsule. So I would say all the cargo that I have submitted will have to go through different thermal vacuum testing, and then we'll see what's actually able to fly in the end. But definitely a possibility.
That's so cool. I don't know if you can say, but when's the target launch date for this? Because I think it's definitely this year. What's the latest on that? Are you allowed to tell us when you're hoping to fly, or what quarter, if we can go that far?
Yeah, currently our launch date is midsummer, so we're looking at mid-July right now, and there's certainly a lot of development effort that's still ongoing, but I think there's a great window to shoot for the middle of this summer, so coming up very quickly.
Fantastic. And I guess we'll get the more information about the science that you're looking to do nearer the time as well. I saw on the website that will be sort of made public before the mission. Do you know all the experiments that you're going to do? I guess because you have to try them in vacuum and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there is actually a lot of information so far that we haven't been able to share. There's they did a great kind of research request for proposal, submitting basically anybody that would want to come up with an idea. And they kind of took all the inputs and then narrowed it down to things that really will make an impact. So focusing on, what is unique about this mission? What can we learn based on the mission profile? So because we're flying to 1,400 kilometers, we're going to be passing through a portion of the Van Allen belts. So looking at radiation focused research experiments that can benefit long duration spaceflight. But in general, really looking at some of the issues that will impact crew members on long duration spaceflight. Then certainly also, what experiments can we actually contribute to in a hands-on capacity? We want to leverage this opportunity of actual humans running research in space. Um, so there's kind of a number of weighting criteria for how the research was evaluated. One of the studies that I'm super excited about, we're actually partnering with the University of Colorado at Boulder, which is my alma mater. And one of the medical conditions that is going to be super critical to understand better for long duration spaceflight is called spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome. And many crew members experience vision changes in flight. And the leading theory is that it's caused by increased pressure in your spinal column and in your intracranial space caused by the fluid shift and microgravity. But there's not necessarily a perfect understanding of the how and the why this happens yet. So one of the research experiments, we're actually doing a number of experiments on this specific topic, but one of them is from my university, and we're going to be wearing these contact lenses that have embedded pressure sensors in them. And so what that affords is kind of the first data looking at immediate pressure adaptation close to arrival on orbit. Typically, you only get like a single data point of pressure by poking the eye to get a sense of your intraocular pressure. But this will kind of give you an actual time history of pressure changes as you're going through flight. So I think it'll be pretty interesting to see what we get there. We call it the cyborg study, which is an endearing name we give it, but it's pretty cool to see what's possible to learn.
It's very cool. So I guess would you be putting contacts on before you go out to the launch pad? So whilst you're getting ready on the ground?
I think it'll be shortly after insertion and shortly after arrival onto orbit. But we also have the opportunity to do it over the course of days. So we'll don them for specific periods throughout the mission just to get a time history of what's happening.
That's so interesting. Well, look, if the mission goes ahead as planned in this summer, I read that you will become the youngest American to reach orbit. Um, that's quite a thing, and it's something that you probably don't think about as much as you're sort of focused on the training and the mission. But that is very impressive. Do you feel a sort of sense of responsibility to sort of represent young people? Because there's probably especially with the advent of the Artemis missions, there's a lot of young people looking at the stars now and dreaming of a career there. Do you feel any sort of pressure from that side of things, or are you just entirely mission focused?
I personally think that all records are just waiting to be broken. So it's significant, and I definitely hope that I'm able to inspire people on a journey of exploration to do big and bold things that they didn't think were possible. But really, I'm super focused on the mission and doing that right. So I have an amazing crew and an amazing team at SpaceX that's working really hard, and I really just don't want to let anybody down.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you've come from you were raised as a classical violinist. Like that's such a, a different background to the sort of traditional math and science. So it shows that sort of anyone can find their way to space, which is amazing. Um, You mentioned your former NASA astronaut Joe Tanner when you were at high school. Thinking back, like what specifically about having a mentor helped influence your decision to pursue aerospace? You know, and how important is having a mentor like that in helping young people achieve their dreams?
It's funny. I I think you, as you look back on your life, you look at very discrete moments that may have entirely changed your life. And having him as a mentor is one of those because I had not considered applying to engineering for any school. Most of the schools I applied to were not for engineering. And in fact, CU was the only one I applied to for engineering. So having his input and guidance that it was a career path that he thought I would be successful in, the guidance, he was actually a professor in the aerospace department at that school when I was attending it. So there were certainly a number of points when I was struggling in the transition into engineering out of arts, for instance, where I was not convinced it was what I wanted to do, that he provided some like very sage advice, which was basically, let's see if you can get an internship in the space industry and figure out if you actually like the field or if you're just unhappy with the current coursework or like what actually is differentiating this for you. So he is incredibly instrumental towards having guided and directed and helped me discover things that I didn't maybe know existed. So I think it's hugely important to find mentors that are willing to support you and invest time in you and help alter the course of your career. But I owe him a lot. So huge thank you
But
to him for that.
well, he'll be there on launch day, no doubt, with a tear in his eye. As will a lot of us. It's gonna be quite a moment. Given that you had that sort of proximity to the Inspiration 4 mission, do you think it's sort of easier going into this because you kind of know what to expect from a sort of final weeks leading up to the launch? Do you feel like you're like that experience has put you in a good position to deal with the understandable uncertainty of a first launch?
Certainly. I think that I have had the immense opportunity to learn from many of the amazing crew members that NASA has as well. Um, you know, Even working up to the first Demo 2 mission with Bob and Doug and the development they went through to guide the team in the effort towards the first flight and working with every single one of our NASA crews since, and then Inspiration 4 and the Axiom crews. I have the immense privilege of having learned, I hope, a lot from them. Um, and their guidance and their wisdom and their advice is certainly every step of the way, and they continue to help me along that path. So I hope to take all the lessons that I've learned from them and contribute and build on the wealth of knowledge on human spaceflight and life in Dragon and how we improve our operations overall.
Mm. Just talking again about life on Dragon, because that's you obviously know a lot about that. How has the Crew Dragon changed since the Inspiration 4 mission? And well, obviously it has changed with recent Axiom flights, and I don't know too much about physically inside what's different, but is there anything that's different about Polaris Dawn capsule other than the planned EVA? Is it modified for this particular mission in any way?
There are certainly some hardware modifications required to support our mission. I think more broadly across every mission, one of my favorite parts about continued operation is every time a crew member gets back from the space station, we get a list of feedback and then we go and incorporate it. So every sequential Dragon that launches has improvements, and the next crew, I always worry that they're gonna make the crew that's on station a little bit jealous by some of the upgrades that they've gotten. So it's super cool to see the SpaceX team respond and continue to improve Dragon with every successive flight. Specific to Polaris Dawn, though, there are absolutely some modifications that are needed, specifically to support, the spacewalk. So one of the big modifications is that we have to add a repressurization system, and so one of our cargo pallets is going to be converted with some additional nitrogen tanks on the cargo pallet to support that operation. Also, some obviously the cupola was removed since that's where we would be exiting the vehicle. We can't have that window blocking it, so that's been removed, and it's been replaced with a mobility aid to help us outside of the capsule with movement and stability, and translating in during the spacewalk. So those are certainly some of the largest modifications required to actually support the EVA, but generally it's pretty comparable. There's not a ton of interior changes.
Mm. And does the nose cone opens up, and that's how you exit the vehicle?
So the nose cone covers the forward hatch,
Hmm.
and then the nose cone opens once we're on orbit to expose some of our forward bulkhead thrusters. And then those thrusters will obviously be turned off during the EVA, and then the forward hatch beneath it is what has to open once the capsule is depressurized.
Mm. I mean, it just all sounds so crazy. But I guess, you're with one of the best companies in the world doing it, so it's you're in good hands for sure. What's the general sort of mood amongst SpaceX? Are most employees kind of all focused on this? Because you see so many resupply missions, and it's almost a weekly basis, maybe more than once a week at the moment. So it sort of takes a human launch to kind of feel a bit special. Um, do you have a sense that the Polaris Dawn is quite a big deal for lots of reasons, and how are you finding that?
Yeah, I'm eternally amazed by what this team is accomplishing. This team, X team, across all of the programs is accomplishing, and so certainly there is an excellent group of people that are focused on Polaris Dawn. But every mission, every cruise, the one that's in flight is our top priority. So we have 4 crew members at station right now. We have cargo vehicle in space right now, and so it's really cool to see the team work on our mission, and it's new development, and it's really interesting problems that they're working for the first time. Um, so it's really cool to see people that are working on our mission and building our hardware and getting to meet the technicians that are building this new hardware for the first time. Um, I think I lost my train of thought there, but
It's because you're imagining what it's going to be like, and I don't blame you for being a bit like, "Wow, this is big. It's
yeah.
big." Um, I don't know if it's been publicized, but are there going to be cameras for the EVA? So within the capsule, because I think for Inspiration 4 there wasn't at least publicly available cameras. Is that something that might be happening for the Polaris program?
Yeah, I think they're working on the full media plan and comm insight that the public will have, and I think they are working on what will be shared with the public during the EVA. But yeah, I believe so.
That's so cool. So other than the EVA, is there any particular moment about the mission that you're particularly looking forward to? Because I imagine the re-entry to Earth is going to be it's like you've got there, you nearly got there, and it's sort of out of your control, and you're just, you know, you can't do anything. You're not pressing buttons. You're just sitting there, basically. So, I don't know. What's your, what moments are you particularly looking forward to?
Certainly, the EVA is very high on my list. I think just first exposure to that environment, figuring out what it's like to feel microgravity and just live in that space.
Yeah, and how long is the mission again, approximately?
It'll be 5 days.
Wow, that's quite a vacation. Well, look, it's been great to chat to you,
Yeah.
and I'm very inspired by what you're doing, and thank you for carrying the flag for us young people. I mean, you're younger than me, so I'm definitely not young anymore, but it's hugely exciting, and I wish you all the best for the mission, and I'd love to chat to you in the future and get your thoughts on it, because a lot of people come back from even low Earth orbit with the overview effect, and having looked down at the Earth and seen with their own eyes how small we are against the blankness of space. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that when you get back. But best of luck with everything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk with you today, and I would love to chat later.
Thanks, Sarah.